Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to another live stream. So, in today's stream, we have a special guest. It is Saturday morning, and this person cannot really do Thirsty Thursdays because it's super, super late for them, and I want to respect that. So, today we're going to do it on Saturday morning. And yeah, I want to go ahead and bring him in, and his name is Carl, and we'll have him introduce himself. Hey,
Hello.
what's up?
Yeah, nice to be here. So I'm Carl, probably better known under my nickname ZetaTwo. Um, yeah, cool to be here.
Yeah, I'm super, super excited. We've been trying to do this for some time. So finally able to cross paths and make it happen. So I'm super excited. So yeah, for those people that don't know who ZetaTwo is, what have you been up to? And tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So I'm from Sweden, but currently living in Switzerland, working for Google in the internal red team at Google, which I've been doing for the past 4 years, a little bit more. And before that, I used to work at a healthcare startup in Sweden. And before that was my first job as a security consultant, did a bunch of pen testing, incident response, and so on. Other than that, over the years, I've been very active in the capture the flag in the CTF community. I used to play a ton of CTF. I would say between like 2015 and 2021 was probably I was like really, really active. And then it's slowed down a little bit over the years in terms of participating, but I also help organize a bunch of different CTF competitions, such as the Google CTF. We did this live CTF for DEF CON for the past 3 years, some local high school CTFs in Sweden, and a few other initiatives. So yeah, just generally very active in the CTF community.
Nice. That is super cool. So as far as like CTFs, what is your favorite to create? Like what kind of challenges? Like what are your favorite and not favorite? Like, oh man, I don't want to do one of those. Do I have to do it?
So I mean, this goes pretty hand in hand in terms of what challenges I like to play as well. So my best area that I also like the most is like reverse engineering. So that's where I would say that I'm really good. But I've always liked, and I always encourage people who are getting into CTFs or playing CTF to try a wide variety of types of challenges, right? So I would consider myself at least like proficient in basically any of the categories, but I would say reverse engineering and maybe a little bit of like binary exploitation, that's really where my kind of home is. And this is also then where I really like to make challenges, like reverse engineering challenges as well. I created one for the Google CTF earlier this year, which it was a little bit of a fun story. So my intention was to learn. So LLVM, the what do we call it? Compiler framework, right? That Clang and so on are built on top of. They have this nice system for like you can do like plugins and stuff. And I was like, I've been thinking for a long time about learning more about this, and I was planning on using this for building like an obfuscator. So I was trying to, okay, I'm going to learn this and like build a challenge and use that as an excuse to learn this. So I started with writing like some C++ code that would be that I then would obfuscate.
Yeah.
And when I turned on like all the compiler optimizations, like the compiled code got so unreadable that I was like, actually, this is fine. This is good as is. So all the obfuscation was done by the compiler without me. Like I just, wrote everything in a way that was easy for the compiler to optimize. And then, it just did some really gnarly stuff with it, like vectorization of stuff. So like, there was like these huge chunks of all these just like, vector instructions and stuff like this. That's like very difficult to read. It was fun. There was a fun feedback comment about it. So we collect some feedback after people solve the challenges. And there was one person who didn't like the challenge, and their comment was like, maybe I missed something, but this challenge just looked like one of those challenges where you're supposed to chug Adderall and grind for 20 hours. And then it was funny because there was another person then who posted like a really nice like script using Anger, this like binary analysis framework. There was like 30 lines of code that would just like automatically solve the whole thing for them. So yes, they did miss something.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a pretty cool story. So
yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. So I wanted to ask, like, all right, about your journey into IT and cybersecurity. Like, what exactly inspired you? Like, what sparked your interest in cyber and getting into like binary exploitation, red teaming versus going like GRC or any other forensics or anything else? Like, what tickled your interest to get into the area that you were in?
Yeah. So for starters, I think I got into security relatively late compared to, I mean, a lot of people that I encountered. Like, so I started programming when I was around 6 or 7 years old. But it was nothing security related because basically, I like to play video games. I basically asked my dad, like, okay, how can I make my own video game? And I mean, he's a medical doctor, like, so he has no idea, right? But he went out, because he's a great dad, and he went out, he went to some bookstore. He came home with like a book of like C++ or something like this. So this is what I started learning when I was like 6 or 7 years old. So I tried to do a little bit of that. I mean, I learned a little bit. It was challenging. Eventually, me and my friend, we got into like web development. So like PHP, HTML, CSS, started building websites, a lot of that. I got back into like game development with like C# in my like early teens, and then also did some web development again in later teens. Ran like a small 2-man consultancy firm with my friend building websites. So nothing of like none of this had really anything to do with security. Of course, like every now and then you would read some article about like, oh, this thing got hacked or there was a vulnerability in this. And I was like, yeah, that's cool. That's interesting. I would read that and be like, yeah, it's pretty cool. But I didn't really like, go deeper on that. And of course, when I was developing stuff, I always tried to do build better applications, both in terms of like functionality, the way I structured my code, but also, of course, learning about security concepts like, oh, maybe I should hash my passwords when I'm building a website. Like, I would eventually, or like, like SQL injection, that's a thing. Like, I would learn about these things, but not like as an attacker, but as like a web developer and like encountering these things for the first time. So yeah, it was like a thing, a little bit in the periphery of my interest, but it wasn't until like halfway through university that I got really into it. So at university, when I was going to university, I basically was deciding between computer science and physics. And eventually I chose physics, with the reasoning being that I spend so much time at the computer anyway. So like I will still keep programming and doing things like that. But I probably won't sit down on a Friday evening with like a maths textbook and learn like calculus. So it's probably better to like, do that in a structured context at the university, right?
Makes sense.
But then towards the end of my bachelor's and like when I was approaching like choosing a master's, I realized that like computers is actually what I'm good at. So then I chose to go into computer science for my master's degree. And on paper, it was supposed to be like specialized into security. But my university basically didn't have any security courses. So there was this one like basic security course that everyone who took computer science had to take, regardless of your specialization. And then there was like one cryptography course. But other than that, it was just, the standard like distributed systems, networkings, advanced algorithms, data structures, stuff like this. But I mean, I still developed kind of the interest for security in the meantime. Started playing a few CTFs, but I didn't really have anyone to play with. So it was just like very rarely. But that was how I slowly started getting into security. And then finally, what's kind of like sealed the deal was towards when I was getting nearer to graduation. I actually initially applied for a job at Google, which was not a security role. It was a normal software engineering role at Google. And I got some good feedback on the interviews, but I eventually didn't make the cut. But I ended up getting a job at a small security consultancy firm in Stockholm. And it was funny because the technical interview for the company was to play a CTF with this CTF team, Hacking for Soju, who I was then part of for many years, who is a really good team, like it used to be one of the top teams. So basically, by doing that, I both got recruited to the team and got the job.
Nice.
Yeah.
That is pretty cool. And I see a lot of companies doing that now. And like, if you're going to be a pen tester, you're applying for a pen testing role, they will give you like a little CTF or an assignment to do prior to even, the recruiter will give you that. And if you pass that, then you can get onto the technical interview. So what is your thoughts on that? Like, I'm not a big fan of that. That's me personally, because in my head, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I do CTFs, but not like as hardcore as maybe you or like John Hammond or all the other really CTF players. Like, I don't look at a scoreboard all day and look at this. That's not me. I'll just go on HackTheBox and do that. I did the pro labs. I did the pro labs because I wanted to prepare for the CPTS. But so like, the reason why I'm not a big fan of that, because when you're doing a real assessment, and correct me if I'm wrong, like if I'm going to do a live pen test, it has nothing to do with a CTF, right? Like a CTF is not going to really show you how to do reconnaissance, go out and do OSINT, do this. Just, we're already in the environment. We know it's vulnerable. We just have to know where it's vulnerable. If we're doing a real assessment, it can be fully hardened and we have to figure it out. Like, we don't know, we're going in blind. So what is your take on those two, or those assessments, those preliminary assessments prior to getting even an interview?
Yeah, so I think there are two big and separate parts to this. The first one is kind of more related to, like, more broadly related to like technical interviews and the way technical interviews are performed. And this, how do you assess candidates in different ways? And this frequently comes up in the context of like people who are like really complaining about these like lead code style programming interviews for like software engineering positions. I think that's like the most common kind of entry into that discussion, right? And then because like, so there's like this broader question of like, how do you assess the technical skills of a candidate, regardless of whether it's security, another technical field, and there are pros and cons, right? Because like a take-home assessment is like, it's good in the sense that as long as you have prepared that thing beforehand, you can hand it out to multiple candidates. It's pretty, like, it scales fairly well, right? That's like an initial filtering step. Of course, you have problems where, for example, first of all, you can't use it too many times because like the solution to this might, leak out on the internet. But that's more of like a logistics thing, right? A more kind of another part of this is that like this might unfairly skew your candidate pool to a certain category of candidates, like namely people who, let's say, have the time to maybe spend the whole weekend on this take-home assignment. So this might like disadvantage, let's say, people with kids or like
exactly.
Right. So so it has that issue, right? On the other hand, people complain about like whiteboarding things with the complaint like, oh, but that's not real or whatever, right? It's like so artificial or something like this. Or if you do like programming, like a kind of lead code style or like a small algorithms thing, and it's like, oh, but this is not the type of code that I will be writing, and so it's like, you could go on. There are other variants of this, right? And there are pros and cons to many of them, and I think I think it's a difficult problem, and I think it's a discussion worth having. I'm just a little bit tired of people, on the internet with very strong one-dimensional opinions, like based on their specific situation. They're like, oh, this whiteboarding thing is just bullshit. Just look at my GitHub profile instead, and you'll see that I can program. It's like, yes, that's good for you, who had like the whole summer to like work on your hobby project on your GitHub, but like maybe not every candidate has that. Or like, how do we know that you wrote that code in the first? Like,
fair enough.
It's like,
fair enough.
Yeah. So that's kind of one part of it. That's like the whole thing of like, how do you assess technical skills of a candidate? And maybe I should, like, the final point on that from my side at least is like, some people will be like, oh, but you just look at my resume. Like, you see, I have the experience. Like, I have 10 years of experience as a developer. Like, I can program. And it's like, yeah, maybe you can, but I've interviewed a lot of people for Google, and I was interviewing a person for like a security analyst role. And, their resume said that they had like 5 years of experience as a malware analyst. And one of my questions that I asked was like, okay, so, malware, they can obfuscate the code, right, to make it more difficult to analyze it. So could you give me like one example of how code can be obfuscated to make it more kind of like open-ended? I didn't necessarily need like a super complicated answer, right? Just give me one example as a starting point for our discussion.
Exactly.
And this candidate, who claimed to have worked for 5 years as a malware analyst, couldn't give me a single example of ways you could obfuscate code.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, like, I feel like you can't trust. I mean, this might also, no fault necessarily of the candidate. Like, they might not be lying, right? They might actually have worked for 5 years as a malware analyst, but like, obviously this is broad enough that they might have then done other things in that role.
Yeah, so that can be so interesting, right? That topic right there, because for an example, myself, right? Let's use me as an example.
Yeah.
Malware is, we can go to the zoo on GitHub. We have live malware. We could throw this in Joe Sandbox and Recorded Future and all these different tools to analyze this. Am I really a malware analyst? No, I'm just like, look, like I did a few videos on it, and I was trying to understand and learn a little more, but I can say, okay, I understood malware. I know what malware is doing, but like, I can't really talk to like the nitty gritty of it, right? It's the same thing like when I used to interview people, as a network engineer or as a system engineer. It's like same thing with Active Directory, right? I have 5 years Active Directory, and I use this example all the time because it's really true. This is when we would have to do live face-to-face interviews, and I remember sitting across from this fella, and I was like, okay, you have 5 years experience with Active Directory, with group policies, all this stuff with Microsoft servers. So we have, and it's funny because a week before this, we had this issue. So it was like live. It was like, it's not like make believe. So I'm like, okay, like, we're going to give you a real example. I didn't say, hey, we had this issue, because I don't want to be like, but I was like, hey, like, there's an issue in the world, right? You have 2 domain controllers. Let's make it simple, DC1 and DC2. We add Carl, or we add, you're the candidate. We add you, Carl, to DC1. But when you do, rep admin /sync all on DC2, Carl's not there. So what would you do? Just because you went to users of computers and you added stuff and you do GP update /force and have you ever been into sites and services? Have you ever been into other areas of Active Directory? And he's like, oh, no, like I just, so that's where it's like so critical to really specify, like on your resume. In this case, if it was like, okay, I have 5 years of AD, semicolon users and computers, a group policy, never set it up, like never really did. Back then it was DC promo, even before it was ADDS, a role to install. So it's just like, It's just so interesting when people say this. And that's why, like, I always make the joke on my resume. If you query SQLI, you won't find it. You know what I mean? Anything I can't be proficient, like you use that word proficient, I won't put it. You know what I mean? I'm not going to make myself look like a fool. I put what I really, really know and I can talk about and back up, not just because I did a CTF and I read Bloodhound one time and, do I even know, for an example, do I even know what Bloodhound really did? No. Same thing like the network engineers, right? Like, oh, I know VLANs and I know this, but all you did was read a piece of, a script that said, okay, config T, okay, into VLAN, blah, 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 and like just did it. But what did you actually just do? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I think it's so different. Going back to everything that like really understanding what you're doing for the candidate sake to do those tests. And but yeah, you can like dequalify or disqualify good candidates that maybe suck at that, like me. Like I'm not good at those little assessments, right? Like I am not good at them. I've had them and I'm like, oh shit, like, some basic ones I can figure out, but it's like, man, like some of them are like harder than the actual pen tests. You know what I mean? It's like, why am I going to go through all of this shit? And I'm like, I'm not fucking doing this,
Yeah. But another thing I think is also like, I just wanted maybe like to kind of add to like that interview thing. It's like, when I'm interviewing something like this, like I don't necessarily expect the candidate to know like the answer to every little fact that you're asking about, but then at least that can be followed by some kind of reasoning about it. Like I was recently interviewing a candidate and I was talking about DNS, and it was basically, it started out with kind of like the, let's say, insecurities of the DNS protocol, right? That like as at its basic form, it's like plain text, there are no integrity checks and so on, right? And then we had talked about like, a man-in-the-middle attack, you could like spoof and so on. And then, I asked about, okay, so do you know any like security features of DNS that could like mitigate these risks? And this was a junior candidate, right? And they didn't know. So they didn't know about things like DNS over TLS or DNSSEC and things like this. Like, okay, that's fine. So then I was like, okay, but let's workshop this, right? What are the issues we have here? So could we try to invent a security feature that we could add to DNS, right? And then eventually, after a little bit of like prodding, they would be like, oh yeah, maybe we could like encrypt the communication and stuff like this. And eventually got to, basically we reinvented like DNS over TLS during the interview, right? Which is like great. So that's like another way to show that proficiency, right? You don't necessarily need to have like your dictionary of all the like this term that's called this and this is that and so on. Like sometimes you just don't know it, but at least then you can give like based off your like other things that you can try to like reason about it and come up with something.
No, exactly. So. No, I totally agree. And there was an interview that I was on. I'm not going to bring up the company, but I was on about 4 or 5 months ago or something like that. Maybe a year and 5 months ago, just like a year ago. Man, time's flying. It was in 2022. And I was on this interview and I was just like, it was for a pen tester. And I was like, once I got into, the room or the chat or whatever, it was like four people. I wasn't expecting that, first of all. And I was like, oh, hey, how you doing, everyone, blah, blah, blah. So when I got in, they literally like, usually, because as I get nervous a little bit, but like this was like interrogation, right? Like I felt like it was like an interrogation. So like my brain just went off. So I remember I was like, hey, like, how's everyone? Blah, blah, blah. We just, instead of like shooting the shit for like 5 minutes to get warmed up and just like to gravitate towards it, just like you said, like if you just ask, okay, how can we secure DNS? Oh, DNSSEC and TLS over, like, oh, like give me, and then you just like warm up and then you can start thinking a little bit, right? Using your brain. And this person was like, all right, you have a low privilege user. If you want to get DA, what are your steps? I'm like, what? Dude, like that was a straight question. That was the first question. I was like, what the fuck? Hold on. So like Not like, oh, what's your Active Directory experience? Have you done any AD pen testing? Like just warm up to the. It was just like straight to the point. Which, whatever. Maybe he was on a time crunch. I don't fucking know. But I was like, okay, like, yeah, there's a million ways that I can do that, and a million ways that I've done it. Right. Sometimes it's as easy as listening with responder, and maybe if it's a small organization, maybe Carl is a DA and I got his hash and I got in, like it could have been like a win like that. Or if it's more secure with, other things, blah, blah, blah. And everything I said was no. Nope, that's not it. Nope, that's not it. So literally, and then I started asking, okay, like, can you give me a hint? Can you give me like, I'm not sure what you really want, because I can get to Carl's house, a million ways, right? I could go to this place, I could go to that place, but the end result is I need to get to his house to hang out with him, right? There might be so many different routes. And so the moral of that was just like, sometimes I don't know if it's an ego thing with people that in this field, especially like, and a few things I want to mention is, if you have a candidate in mind already, don't waste other people's time, right? And with this place, it's a small community, right? A lot of pen testers know each other. So this place, I was talking to a buddy. I'm like, dude, I just fucking got his worst interview of my life, probably, And he's like, yeah, I just got an offer with XYZ. I'm like, yo, son, like that's the same fucking company. So like, come to find out, like he interviewed there like 3 weeks ago, 3 weeks prior to me. And then like they gave him the offer, but I guess they had to interview. I'm like, if you already picked the person, don't fucking do that. You know what I mean? You just waste an hour of my life. Like, just say, hey, I already made an offer. Sorry for your inconvenience, and fuck off,
Yeah.
It was just like, have you experienced that? Or do you guys experience, like, if you have a candidate in mind, do you still interview other folks?
So, I mean, generally speaking, at Google, I mean, there are exceptions to this when you recruit for like very specific positions and so on. But like generally speaking, with a company that big, we don't really recruit like for like a specific, this position in this team. It's more like we need 10 security engineers, and then you get 10 people who pass the bar, and then you like slot them out into different teams where they're needed. So it doesn't really compare in that sense. It's not like, okay, we have one position, we have 10 applicants, we're going to select one of them. It's like, yeah, it's a little bit different, right? It's because of the scale of this thing. And it's like sometimes you even have like, well, maybe, okay, nowadays we aren't interviewing or like recruiting as much, but like when we were recruiting a lot, we were just like getting people into the pipeline without there necessarily even being like a specific spot free, because we just knew that, over the next couple of months, we're going to probably need like this many people. So we just had people like in the pipe without knowing exactly, where they would end up.
It's just like, I just feel, sometimes like, I guess like this place wasn't as big as Google, it's not a Google, but like it was a smaller pen testing firm, and, and they were looking for contractors. So I'm like, okay, like it wasn't a full-time, it was just doing contract work. And I was like, oh, this would be cool. But it was just like the whole like process was no bueno. It's terrible, man. It was terrible.
But I want to go back, by the way, to what you said about like not liking the CTF type or like the take home, because we talked about like the broader thing of like how to assess candidates in general. Like, but I also have opinions on this thing we just said about like these types of technical like CTF style challenges, and I think this also goes broader to a criticism that I sometimes see about CTFs in general, like not just in a recruiting context, but just like as a hobby or as a educational thing, where people, there is this criticism about like, yeah, but it's not real, or it's not realistic, or things like this, right?
I'm one of them. So
yeah,
I'll
and I mean,
admit.
I get it, but and my kind of response to that is, let's say you're learning some some subject like mathematics or physics or computer science, right? You're learning like mathematics, you're learning calculus. Like when you start out learning that, like you will be given like a very nicely written out equation and like, solve for, well, that's more algebra, right? But like, solve for X, or like calculus thing, like, compute this integral. And it's like, it's perfectly laid out for you. And it's usually made up in a way that like the answer will be like 4 times pi or some nice round number like this. And then you start there. And then, but that's not how the real world works, right? That's not how an engineer, like the engineer doesn't go to like work and get like a worksheet of like equations to solve, right? But you still need to start with like, okay, I need to build up my basic building blocks. Like, and then and you get to a more advanced thing where, okay, now you need to also formulate the equation based on these facts, and then like and so you get to more and more advanced problems where like more and more of your like crutches are taken away to, and maybe at the end you might even do like, oh, now we're going to do a 5-week end of semester project where you're going to solve this problem, right? Like that's how you study things in like a structured setting, like at a university or something. And to me, like the CTFs and like security work, whatever type of work you want to talk about in security, it's the same way. Like no, like CTFs alone will not make you like a fully faceted like penetration tester or red teamer or vulnerability researcher or whatever, but it helps you build those basic building blocks, those basic like skills, like that technical understanding of certain topics. Like by solving let's say some challenge around SQL injection, you might understand at a deeper level like how does SQL and SQL injections work. Now, of course, like to find that endpoint that's vulnerable to that SQL injection, that's like, maybe that's a separate skill, right? So it's not like everything, but I think it's an excellent way of building that basic technical, like the foundational knowledge. So that's why I really like CTF. It's really, really, really good, in my opinion, for teaching like some types of skills, which then, if you want to be a like productive person in like a work setting, you need to complement that with other type of like, skills development.
No, absolutely. No, I totally agree with that. I think where the unrealistic stuff, I guess where I've done some CTFs and then going in and taking a base 64 and going on cracks, or doing decrypt and all that, like those kind of things, I don't like because I get confused and I'm not really good at them. I'm going to be I'm very honest. And then when you have like something like Forest or Active from like HackTheBox, right? Then say, okay, now I'm going to run Nmap, and then I want to 389 LDAPs open. Now we have Active. So if I'm on an internal assessment, I can translate those skills to maybe a real assessment, because I can do my little walkthrough, take my snippets, and I'm like, okay, like maybe I can use this in the real world. And I have used some of the skills that I've learned on some of these boxes in the real world, no doubt. Like, I'm not saying it's completely bullshit. Like, if you do a HackTheBox machine, you're never going to use that in the real world. But I think like some of the methodology is there, right? Like understanding what you have to initially do, your Nmap scan, see which ports are, like maybe go to a website, go do your inspect elements, see what blah, blah, see if there's any command injection, whatever the case may be. So that like those steps are there regardless if it's a CTF or a real world. But I think like when it gets into like the reverse engineer, because I'm not a reverse engineer, so maybe reverse engineers are really doing that in the real world. Maybe I don't fucking know because I'm not one of those. But yeah, it's really interesting stuff. And I always it was so hard for me to get into CTFs because I never played a video game in my life. I never really played video games. So getting into that like gamified stuff, that's why I really never got into them until I started studying for some of these like hands-on certifications. So it's like the OSCP and all these other certs. And it's like, okay, like now I need to learn it. And even I don't know how the OSCP is now, but when I was studying it about 7 years ago now in 2018, like I felt like it was some Vuln Hub machines put together, and you're doing some like using immunity for buffer overflow and doing whatever we were doing back then. And I never really seen that in the real world, right? Like that I felt it was very CTF-y. And it's like we're learning this, but like outside of this, when I did my first assessment, I remember taking my notes. I was like, fuck, none of this stuff lines up. Like this is not the same. And that's when I really started thinking, like, are these certifications? And remember that was the hot thing on the block back then. Now we have a million other practical certs, right? But back then it was like the hot thing on the block. So I was like, man, like if this is how it is, I didn't learn shit. I really didn't learn anything. Yeah. So yeah. So and go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Yeah, no, I was just like maybe like one thing that should be added. So over the past let's say over the past 5, 6, 7 years, like the CTFs have like completely exploded in like the popularity and the number of them available and so on, which on one hand is great. There's a lot of resource available, but this also means that there's a very wide range of quality of CTF competitions. Like there are really, really good competitions, but and I mean, I hate that this is true, but this is undeniably true. There are some really, really low quality competitions and challenges and so on. So like, and this is a bit of a challenging thing, right? Because when you're like recommending to, let's say, beginners to get into CTF, it might be very difficult for them to tell, like, am I frustrated by this challenge because like I don't know the right things to solve it, or am I being frustrated because it's actually a really bad challenge? And then like to a beginner, it's essentially impossible to differentiate between these. Like, is this a great learning opportunity where I'm just right now at the lowest point mentally, or is this just a complete waste of time?
And that's definitely good, because only someone like yourself, maybe like other people that are really, really into this world, can tell. Me, I'm going to be honest, like I wouldn't be able to tell, like I would be able to give my feedback of like, oh man, like this fucking thing crashed, like offshore. Like every time I would try to get something, it would crash.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, and anytime I run Sliver or any kind of C2 framework, boom, the damn connection crashed. So I'm like, okay, is this a me thing, or is it the fucking box is a piece of shit? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's where it's like, but I don't really design these things. Like I designed like a few little ghetto ones in my house that I have like Carl VPN in and just do it just because to have some fun for the night, but not like really in-depth, really crazy CTF challenges. I like Wi-Fi challenges because I like Wi-Fi is really fun. I actually did the Wi-Fi one at DEF CON. That was pretty cool.
Nice.
Yeah, but yeah, it's definitely fun. And I think I wanted to ask you, since I asked Tiberius this too, and so you're a CTF guy, you play CTFs. What is your thoughts? Say for an example, because I don't really know a lot of the CTF platforms. I know like CTF Time, Pico, CTF, Hack, but like let's, for example, for the non-CTF players that just know, like maybe try Hack Me and HackTheBox, right? Because those are the big players in the game. So if I'm doing a machine, let's say for example Dante, because Dante is probably the most pro lab that's the most famous one, right? Or I guess that's like the first one people do. So how do you feel if I'm like, hey, Carl and Sam and Bob and everyone, let's all jump on tonight and do Dante? Is that cheating, or is that teamwork?
No, so in general, I strongly recommend people to play CTFs together,
Yeah.
right? And I mean, okay, so cheating, by cheating we could mean different things. We could mean like is this actually against the rules of whatever thing we're doing, right? And I mean, for most of these, so generally we divide things up into like within the CTF, you have like CTFs, which are like the kind of time boxed events, like that would run over a weekend or something. And then we have this what we call war games, which is like things like HackTheBox or stuff, which is like a site where you can just go and try this challenge at any point in time, right?
Okay.
And the general like consensus for like these kind of war game sites, HackTheBox, Over the Wire, the Pico CTF problem archive, whatever, is that like you can engage with that material in however way you want. Like it's there for you because there's no prestige or you're not winning money. Like
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
just there to solve, right? And there I would strongly recommend you team up with other people to like other I think you can either go with people who are like at the same level as yourself and you're bouncing ideas of each other, or you can have someone with more experience and then they can kind of like mentor you through something like this. But whichever way you want to do it, I always recommend people to like collaborate when doing these things, because like that's also a really great way to learn. You will have different backgrounds, you will know about different things, so you will like teach each other throughout the process. So yeah.
Yeah, most definitely. The reason why I asked, because I remember like when I was doing Dante, I was doing it with a group of people, and I was
Mm-hmm.
thinking like, because I'm gonna be honest, I don't really read the like, is this against anything? I don't know if
Yeah.
it is. And then I remember being stuck on a flag, on one of the flags. I'm like, fuck, let me see if there's a walkthrough, because I'm
Yeah.
stuck. I don't know
Yeah.
what to do. Or
Mm-hmm.
whatever I thought would work wasn't working. And then like the other, the other two people I was doing it with, it wouldn't work either. And then we invited one other guy that's knows his shit, and it still wasn't
Yeah.
working. So I'm like, all right,
Yeah.
maybe it's, and going back to your, maybe it was the box, or maybe it was just us. And then I couldn't find any
Mm-hmm.
walkthroughs on any of the pro labs. So I'm like, wait a minute, is this like, why is this? Because like, if you look for a walkthrough on maybe another one, another machine, you could probably find it. And like, I'm not really involved in too much of the nerd world,
Mm-hmm.
so like, I don't really know too much of that. So I'm like, oh, let me just go ask, like, in a Discord server, hey, like, does anyone know where I can find some help with this? And they're like, oh, restart the machine, that exploit should work. So, and
Mm-hmm.
then we restarted the instance, and then we had to get to that point again, which thank God it was only like 2 or 3 flags in, if I remember correctly. And I was like, okay, now it works. So it was like actually the box that was
Yeah.
having the issue. So it's like, but the moral of that was just like, okay, I don't know if, the fact that we didn't have any walkthroughs on the internet and no one really talked about any of this, is this cool? Like, if we're all working on a team for this, because it's like,
Yeah.
and yeah.
No, I mean, I think, of course, when it comes to, so for example, like HackTheBox, which is like a commercial platform, right? And they're
Yep.
like paid subscription. Of course, they want to like make sure that they can get the most value out of the content they produce and so on. So I don't know if there's anything in there like terms about restrictions on like what you can and cannot publish and so on. Of course, you would have to check that with. So
Yeah.
I'm not a HackTheBox user really, but just generally in principle, like if you compare, for example, Pico CTF, which is I think my go-to recommendations for like new people, because they are this like high school focused like CTF, right? And they have this problem archive of all their challenges, and they're really good. And they start out at a really, really basic level, and it goes to more advanced stuff. And if you Google around for those, you can find solutions for a lot of those problems. So, of course, when it comes to like actual competitions, there will be rules about, is this a solo competition? Is it a team competition? Most of the time, it's a team competition. So, like, the whole idea is that you collaborate. But even in the team competition, the rule is generally that, like, you can collaborate within your team, but you cannot go and like post a question on Stack Overflow about like how do I solve this thing, right?
Yeah.
So
Gotcha.
yeah.
Cool. So yeah, I had to do that a few times too. Talk too much, my throat starts getting all. Thank you, Kev. Yeah, green teas. I love my green tea. This is my favorite drink. I'm really addicted to it. But I know we only have like 15 minutes, so I want to talk about like future predictions. Like, what do you think? Like, for all the, I don't know how old you are, but I'm almost 40. Right, so I'm not a young 20-year-old. That's probably why I don't play the fucking video games and not really like that. I don't probably look almost 40, but yeah, I'm almost 40. But so like for the new folks on the block, like, what do you think what do you think holds for like the cybersecurity world? Like, do you think it's going to get more, like, not, I don't want to say more difficult because it's getting saturated with folks, but like, what do you see the future in like cybersecurity, pen testing, offensive security for the next, for example, 5 years?
I would say I'm generally a bit of a conservative person in, like, with development and technology and and stuff like this. And for example, I'm completely uninterested in all of these like hype waves. Like the first there was like the blockchain craze, and I didn't like jump on that. And then now of course we are like in the AI hype wave, right? And some people are like, oh, it's gonna like completely change the industry, and it's like all the jobs are gonna be completely different, and so on. And like I will admit that, contrary to some of the previous hype waves, I do think that there is some kind of something in all of this. But it's like we will need to have this kind of big hype wave pass to see what's actually left standing as things that will actually impact us. But in terms of like the security industry, 5 years, I don't think there will be big changes. I think there might be some new stuff, like there might be new areas, new things, but like the old stuff is not going anywhere anytime soon. Like we solved SQL injection 20 years ago, but it's still there.
Yeah.
Like, so it's like, and this is going to be true. Like, there might be a day when we finally actually solve it, right? Like there are no more SQL injections in the world, or like, we solve XSS or whatever, right? But we're not there. We won't be there in 5 years. We probably won't be there in like 15 years. So
I'm with you.
Yeah. So it's like, but I get also where this question is coming from, though, because like I sometimes see people who are like worried about, frequently I think this is like a common thing. Let's say you're like late teens, early 20s, you're thinking about like what direction to go into, maybe what to study, trying to plan your future, and so on. And I wouldn't worry too much about like things that maybe will happen in 10 years and focus more on like what's real right now, because that would probably be real in 3 years or 5 years when you graduate as well, right? And like I'm also a big proponent of like being very strong on your like fundamentals. And this also, I mean, I'm colored by my background, right? I told you about how I didn't get into security until like at the end of my bachelor's, basically, right? And I sometimes see these people who are like, I don't know, 17, who are like, okay, how do I get into cybersecurity? And to me, like, security isn't a thing like by itself. Like security is like an adjective that you put on something else, like, you know, network security, application security, or even more like abstract if you're talking about, you know, processes, policies, you know, if that's your thing. Like it's like a thing, it's a quality of another thing. And to me, to be really good at, like, let's say application security, you need to understand applications.
Yep.
To be good at network security, you need to understand networks, and so on. So that's why I would recommend people to like focus on like the fundamentals, and then, you know, you can slowly start mixing in the security aspect into this, just like you could you know, let's say you start out as a software developer and then you go into the direction of application security, in the same way that, you know, you start out as a software developer and then you go into the direction of like high performance computing, or like really focusing on like UI, UX, and like human computer interaction aspects and stuff like this, right? It's like different qualities or specialization to like some kind of fundamental thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to ask one more thing, and then we'll start looking at these questions, and then, you know, obviously I want to respect your time. So you touched on this a little bit, but, you know, what is your advice? What advice would you give someone looking to get into cybersecurity in today's day and age? And are any certification courses or practical steps you'd recommend?
Yeah. So when it comes to certifications, I think my relationship to certifications is, again, like strongly colored by my background, right? Like I come from Sweden, a country where education is free. Like you even get paid to go to university, right?
Yeah.
So to me, it's like, why would I pay a massive amount of money for like some course with a certification when I could go to university, get paid for it, have fun, learn much more, and just have a great couple of years of my life, right?
Fair enough.
But of course, that's because where, you know, I'm from and the situation there. Like if you grow up, for example, in the US, that's a completely different equation. There we're talking like, okay, do I want to put myself into like lifelong debt to get this degree that might not even get me where I want? Or do I take this smaller bet on, you know, I don't know, a few $1,000s on this like 3-month course plus certification that might get me an entry-level job, and then I'll take it from there? Like it's a completely different balance there.
Yeah, and that's fair, and that's definitely a fair fact, because everyone's in a different place in the world. Everyone has their own background and their own stepping stones into life. So it's like, it's a really hard question, because I get the question all the time, like, what would be your advice? You know, like my advice, like, yeah, thank God, let me knock on wood, like I had a scholarship, so I had a full ride in undergrad, right? So not everyone has that. So it's like, if I had to pay out of pocket, hell no, I would have never went. You know, I would have went like a whole different route, and just maybe not even into, you know, computers. I would have probably went in a traditional trade route, maybe doing electrician or following like my family's footsteps. And so everyone has their own, you know, pathway of life and whatever suits you. And that's always my advice. Like, don't compare yourself, or don't try to ask, I guess not, maybe that's not the right question. Like, don't try to like be like someone else, because everyone is always fighting their own things, and just like figure out what you are, what's suitable for yourself, and not, you know, like, oh, I want to be like Carl because he works at Google, right? But maybe in the background, once we're off camera, you know, hopefully not, but like maybe Carl's going through some other shit, right? It's like, and then, so it's like always, you know, it's so hard to like have this advice to give to people, because we don't know what people are going through behind a computer, behind a thing.
I will say it's like, so, you know, to try to add something concrete, because like, you know, it's kind of a cop out to always be like, well, you know, it depends on your circumstances. It's like, yeah, no shit. Like, but I would say, like, at least one, like my approach to kind of like life in general is to like, it's always good to be doing some like planning ahead. But to me, like the planning is much more important than the plan. Like thinking through, where you are currently in life, like what options you have, and maybe have like a tentative, like, okay, I'm doing this thing now, which, could potentially end up in like this and this direction, which I would kind of like, but like don't necessarily hold yourself to that too strongly. Like think about things and the options and the situation, but definitely be flexible to adapt to that. Maybe you get a really interesting job offer in one case, or there's like something you want to study that looks really interesting. And I think this goes just in life in general. I feel like a lot of younger people that I talk to, they seem to have almost this kind of like checklist approach to life, or this like almost like video game level up system where it's like first I'm doing this, and then I'm gonna do that, and I'm gonna get a job here, and I'm gonna use that as a springboard to get a job here, and that's my career like planned out 1 2 3 4 5 done. And it's like, well, I mean, no, it's like, no, I mean, well, it's good that have an idea, right? But like I never planned to move to Switzerland, and I ended up here, right? I mean, as I said, like I applied for a software engineering position, and then I got a job as a penetration tester. And like even later in your career, you might want to switch things, and you don't have to go full like the whole meme about like, oh, I'm gonna move out in the woods and be like a farmer, or like it doesn't have to be like that extreme, but it can be like, okay, I worked in security, maybe I want to work as a software developer, or like I worked as a red teamer, and now I actually want to move over to like the blue side and do like incident response stuff. It could be small changes, big changes. I think that's like, it's like, to be a little bit cheesy, like, it's about like the journey and like, reevaluating your decisions and kind of like enjoying things as they are happening, and not just this like checklist of things that you need to like cross off one after another.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you right there, because I've done that. Like I did that in my early 20s. I was like, this is what I want to do. Like, oh, I want this. You have a baby, you get married, have a career, and do that shit. My whole plan, like what I envisioned my life from like when I was 20 to 30, that 10 years, nothing lined up. I think one thing out of my whole plan was like, oh, I got one of these out of 10 of them for the fucking 10-year journey plan. But yeah, we only have a few minutes. Let me see if there's any questions.
Yeah, I saw there were a couple of questions here that we could look at.
Let's see. So this one, I can show this one first. Do I have to know offensive side if I want to be in SOC analyst? I guess I can answer that first, and I'll tag team you in. I think it's always good to have both sides, because if you're defending against something, for an example, DC sync attack, right? Or just like if maybe your SOC's getting lit up with PS Exact or Bloodhound, or any kind of like tools that you're, maybe you have something going on. Now, if you understand what that tool's doing, you can defend against it. Or, vice versa. If you want to be on the offensive side, understanding some of those defenses is good too, because now we can invade those defenses. So that's my take on that. What about you, Carl?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I feel, okay, first, I want to answer this like, on the kind of factual, concrete level. And then I think there's like a broader, interesting thing here. And I do think, yes, well, like to become a SOC analyst, like, no, I mean, everyone starts somewhere, right? Like you could start, entry-level SOC analyst without a lot of experience on offensive, security, right? But I think if you want to be a really good blue teamer, you need to some extent know offensive security. Like, it's like, can you be a goalkeeper in football without like having ever shot like a free kick or like play? Like it's Probably not, right? You still need to know what to expect coming against you. And it's like in your analysis, like, let's say you are working in the SOC, you find some weird little thing in your logs, you look into this and you suspect that this might actually be an attack. Like, okay, maybe someone accessed some file and this was weird, right? If you have no idea about attacks and the offensive side of security, how could you possibly know what other things to check in that system to confirm your confirm or reject this hypothesis?
Yep.
It's impossible, right? And then just a little bit broader, without going too much on a philosophical thing, it's like, I feel like, a lot of these times you have these do I need to know X to do Y? And it's like, I think just in general, the question is just like, do you have to? Probably not. If you want to be really good at it, probably yes. Like, do I need to know programming to be a good pen tester? Like, I mean, you can probably sit there and run like Nmap and Bloodhound and, off-the-shelf tools, and you can probably do fine with that. But like, what about the day you need to like write your own automation and write an exploit for a vulnerability you found and so on? Then you're going to need that programming, right? So I think this is in general, it's like no, but yes, is like the answer to almost all of these questions.
Cool. Let's see what other. Hey, what's up? Have a fun degree. I want to move to a country like you and get done. I guess we can. I'll do this. Can I do bug bounty as a career? I don't do bug bounties, so I can't answer that. What about you? Do you think so?
This is, I think, roughly like saying, can I don't know, can I be a musician as a career or something like this, right? It's like, yes, but if you want to be among like the top, you're gonna have to work extremely hard to do, especially nowadays when the field is more saturated than what it used to be. Like, I have some friends who are like among the top bug bounty hunters in the world, and they have earned actually millions of dollars doing that. Like, they are earning way more than I do working at Google, but they are like the 0.001% or something of like, it's this like tiny thing. It's like me now starting to learn guitar because I want to be a rock star, right? Like, it can happen. I can get there, but I think, at least, I mean, it also depends on your risk appetite, right? I'm a pretty risk averse person. I would, in the same way that I would probably never have like rock star as a career goal, I would probably never have like, bug bounty hunter as a full-time career goal. But it's, it's possible. Like, there are bug bounties, you can earn money from it. If you do well enough, you can earn a lot of money.
Exactly.
But it's going to be a lot of work.
Yeah. All right. So a couple more here. Let's see. Is this a question? I have no formal degree and I want to move to a country like you. Is it possible to search backing me up like CDA?
Mm-hmm. Like, basically, do you actually need like a degree or something, or could something like a certificate work for like getting a job in a different country or like at some of these companies, something like this? I guess that's the question, right?
Yeah, I think that's from what I understood too.
Yeah. I guess there are kind of two parts to it. There's like, can you get the job? Like, can you pass the interview? Can you get hired? And then there are, of course, depending on where you are and where you're going, there are all these things around like visa applications and visa requirements and so on. I know, for example, Google, generally speaking, for our roles, we don't have degrees as a requirement. I think the standard language of most of our positions is like a bachelor degree or equivalent work experience or something like this. So you can compensate the degree by working a few years in another position, for example. And I think this is fairly common in a lot of companies. Of course, then how do you get that first job is, of course, and then maybe, that can be done with some certification or something like this.
Cool. So we have 2 more that I want to show up here. And would creating a GitHub be better look on a resume rather than explaining a at-home lab trying to get into cybersecurity from network engineering? I guess I'll take that, because that's pretty much what I ended up doing. I was a network engineer, and then I got into cybersecurity. The way I got into cybersecurity was a little different, because if a lot of people don't know, I got my PayPal hacked, and then that's what intrigued me when I was still a network engineer. And then I was in undergrad still, in my 3rd year, and then I pivoted to, back then it was called information security. It wasn't cybersecurity yet. That shows how old I am. But yeah, and I would always say set up a home lab, and having that network engineering background, you can use like EVE-NG or GNS3, since you understand some of the routing, switching, and then you can put like Kali Linux OVAs into your environment and get do more attacks when you have that network engineering background. I always think it's super, super beneficial. What about you, Carl?
I mean, I would say, like, why not both, right? Like, now I haven't really set up like a home lab myself in that sense, but if you're doing that, like, for example, I do a lot of my projects. I use, like infrastructure as code solutions, like, Terraform, Ansible, stuff like this, which I have in GitHub repositories, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like, build your home lab and, document it in a GitHub repository. Like, I don't feel like these two are at odds with each other. I think these could like actually like synergize. Yeah.
Complement each other. Yep. Cool.
Yeah.
So let's 2 more and we'll call it quits. Any option to HackTheBox CDA cert for getting a job? Oh, I don't have that cert. I just went through the whole CPTS and CBBH, and I will be going through this since I have the path already. And I have to say, going through HackTheBox training, it's really, really informative. I have to say, it's a lot of reading, and that's probably the one downfall. I rather have videos, and that clicks for me. It resonates a little more when I watch a video, and I can pretty much like copy and like watch and like, okay, like he's running this, I'm running this. Like, I learn better like that than like reading, and then I have to go back up like, oh shit, what is this command again? Like going back and forth is a little, but some people like the reading better. They say it like it sticks better, but everyone has their own ways. But yeah, if you want to become a SOC analyst, the one bad, I don't want to say it's a bad thing, but the only thing that if you're looking to get into government, like, I don't know where you are in the world, if you're in the US, having like Security Plus, stuff like that even is better because of DoD and, CYSA Plus. And, but this one will definitely get you hands-on. You have to do an exam. You have to, look at incidents and stuff like that. So I think it's definitely would compensate and complement each other. So yeah, I don't know what your take is, since.
Yeah, I no strong opinions really. I mean, I guess so. Even though HackTheBox themselves have existed for quite a while now, their whole thing of like getting into like more kind of like the professional side and certification is like a little bit of a newer thing for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's probably good because the content is probably up to date and so on.
Yep.
But bad in the sense that all of these certificates might not be as well like recognized, especially among, let's say, slower moving employers like government entities and so on. So for the content, it's probably good, but if you're looking, as you said, if you're looking for specific roles and so on, always check like what types of certificates that those employers care about.
Exactly. Cool. All right. So you're waiting for the video? Yeah. Once I get the results, I'll make that. I'll make that video. And this is the last one, guys. And if you guys have any, questions for me or Carl, obviously you guys know where to reach me, and I'll have Carl. He goes by ZetaTwo on Twitter and all that good stuff, so you can hit him up. So if you have no work experience in cybersecurity, the tool simulated in a laboratory is an experienced potential employer. What else can you? Yeah, I would say actually having a lab, and I'll go back to like my system admin days when I would have like potential people come in and like from IT support and go into sysadmin, having that lab set up. I know Carl, he said he doesn't really have home labs. He has everything in Terraform and infrastructure as code, etc. But like when I would hear that people say, okay, back then, you use like virtual PC or, VMware, but it's not as like easy to get today. Today's everything is super easy. You can get OBAs everywhere. You can just download them, install it. But back then, you actually had like physical machines. Like I remember when I was doing like my MCSC 2003 server, I had like 6 old ass Dell machines. My fucking room was like a heater, you know? And so, yeah, so actually having that lab, that'll definitely show you that you're eager to learn and talk about that lab saying, okay, like I've done this, whatever you're doing with your lab. And then for the cybersecurity stuff, what I would always recommend is do it like an attack defend. So not only have like your Kali machine and like your Windows server and whatever Metasploitable, a damn vulnerable web app, actually put something like Waza or Splunk or something like that. So now when you're attacking that Metasploit machine or Metasploitable machine, if you're doing like, for example, SSH attacks, now that's going to be logged if you deployed your sensor or you have your traps set up and stuff like that. So now you can talk about, oh yeah, I have my lab and my lab is set up like XYZ. And I think that's super impressive because it shows you the eager to learn and have that stuff set up. So what about you, Carl? And then we'll call it a day.
Yeah, I mean it's always tough, right? Like how to get that first job, because like once you have that on your resume, like things become like much easier to get like the second job and so on. And I don't think there's necessarily like one answer to this. It's just like you need to somehow show that you have some basic skills, some ability to learn, willingness, and some like analytical skills on top of that. And you can do this through like building your home lab, having some GitHub projects, writing blog posts, playing CTFs, getting one of these entry level certificates. Although the CEH was mentioned in the chat, absolute garbage, but some people actually require it. It's the only certificate that I have taken because I had to take it because we had clients who were putting it as like requirements for like the tenders that they were putting out. Absolute ass content, but
I have it
can
too.
be
So
required.
same thing. Same thing.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it's everything is better than nothing. I would say.
Absolutely. All right, this is the last one. Absolute last one. Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
If you guys missed yours, I love you guys, but just throw it in the chat, throw it in the comments, and I'll get to it when I can. Mm-hmm. All right. So, what other certification needed to, and how can I land the penetration testing job? All right, I'll let you take this, Carl. You can go with that.
So, first of all, in general, there is nothing that's needed. There is no one solution. I mean, also because like it's a huge world, the companies across the world do things in completely different ways. This is going to be completely dependent on where you are and so on. But again, like anything is better than nothing, right? If you can add some entry-level certificate to your resume, that's probably good, but it's never going to be a requirement. Yeah, I mean, I've worked for 3 different companies throughout my career, and I've hired for those companies, like done interviews with candidates. In none of those we have required any kind of certifications or whatever. We especially in my 2 previous jobs, which were smaller companies, we would look at the resume and try to like assess it as a whole. Like, do we think that this candidate has the basic skills to be eventually productive in this role, right? At Google, there is like this minimum bar of that we generally require, a bachelor's degree or a master's degree, or 3 to 5 years of work experience, just because like the way we operate. But even that actually is not a strict requirement, I think, for some of the entry-level roles. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's like I want to give like a concrete answer, but the truth is like there is no there is no checklist. There is no like do this and this and you'll get the job. Like the world doesn't work like that, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll add some stuff to that and then we'll call it a day. I think as far as certifications, Carl's right. Like, and obviously it depends on where you are in the world and what companies you're hiring for. And the most important thing is look at what they're requiring, right? Like if you apply for a job, if you're going out for a job on whatever, LinkedIn, Dice, or remote jobs, whatever you are, and you put in penetration tester, and if it says like required OSCP or PMPT or whatever these certifications are, then it might, I would still apply because I've applied for jobs in the past that, even when I was a network engineer and they're like, oh, you need to know Palo Alto and Checkpoint. I'm like, I don't fucking know any of that. I'm just a Cisco guy, but I understand how networks work, right? So if you have been if you're like a beginner, a junior, you're looking for junior pen testing roles, I'm assuming from what you said here, they don't expect you to know much, right? They'll probably mentor you. You probably go like, for example, NetSpy, right? They will hire you. They'll put you through like a 6-month program through their university. And if you graduate, then you start getting onto client engagements. I think that's fucking fantastic, right? Because I have 3 friends that work there. And then like 2 friends are like seniors there. And then 1 went through this university. So I thought that was super, super cool. And like, he didn't even know what Burp Suite was. And he's a web app guy now. Like he literally in 6 months, they got him from working, he was cutting grass or whatever the fuck he was doing. And now he's, on client engagements 8 months later. So obviously it all depends on what you want to do. But as far as certifications, I don't think they're really, I want to be honest. I do certifications more to talk about them. I don't need the certifications that I'm doing, right? Like I don't do it because, oh, I need this for more money or my job. I do it so now I can give feedback for those folks that are looking to do this certification. For example, CPTS. I don't need to do that. Like what do I benefit out of that? Nothing. Right? Me personally. But now I can say, okay, like this is awesome. I can talk about my journey doing it and my recommendation, pros, cons, the good, bad, the ugly. But yeah, hopefully that answers that. You want to say something, Carl? Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to like really stress on that thing you mentioned about like apply anyway, because like, sometimes the people who are writing these ads, they have no idea what they're talking about. It's like, I don't know if you've seen these like posts about like, oh, we're looking for like a junior software developer. You need to have 10 years of experience with Kubernetes, React, blah, 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 blah. And so it's like, dude, what the fuck? Like, it's like, if the company seems interesting, if the role seems interesting, submit an application. And also, it might also be in even in the situation where they do know what they're talking about. Like, okay, we need like a somewhat senior person. And then, they realize after 5 months of searching that they cannot find one, then they might be like, well, okay, but we got these 4 applications from like junior people. Maybe we could like get 2 of those and have this guy mentor them and we can find a different solution. Like, it's like you are searching for a job, but they are also searching for candidates, right? It's a mutual thing, right? So they might know what they wanted initially, but they might need to have like changed their mind because of circumstances as well. So like put in that application, and like worst case, you get rejected, and that's it. And like even if in the case you get to the interview, then at least you get like interview training, so like how to sell yourself in a good way in the next interview, right?
Yeah, and I just want to say one more thing because we can talk for hours. I think one more thing that is really, really important when you're looking for a job is networking. Not routing, switching, not TCP/IP. Actually, network with folks. Like what Carl said, maybe get into some CTFs, get into some community on Discord or whatever. Just like show your face and show your work, because I think that's the last four positions I've gotten. I didn't really have to. I had to apply to one. right? But like everywhere else was just like I knew someone, and then like this person knew this person, and it was just word of mouth. So obviously, stay up to date on like your resume, obviously, but also like on LinkedIn, you leverage that, leverage Twitter. I'm not really good with Twitter, but like LinkedIn, I like to connect with folks. I'll talk to people, or people ask me questions, and then I'll establish that relationship, because we never know when we will, you know, need each other. And it's a mutual relationship. Like maybe they need something from me, maybe I'll need something from them. And it's just like a mutual thing. And always, I don't know, I'm just more of a giver. Like always remember, like it's not always like a taking game. So like if someone can do something for you, don't only like, oh, please, 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 but like always offer your hand too. Like that's just me. So, yep.
Yeah.
That's it.
100%.
Oh, shit, I think my NAS just went off. Because I can hear like, whoa, and then all of a sudden it gets quiet. I'm like, what the fuck? Why is it so quiet back there? But yeah, and that's pretty much it. Any last words, Carl, for everyone out there?
No, I mean, thanks for having me on. Again, like I'm a big proponent of CTFs. So if you think that's interesting, you should check out. I think I named a few things previously, but like CTF Time, good website with the calendar. Pico CTF and Pwn College are two great sites to learn. So Pwn College is by the Arizona State University, and they have this like lectures and labs and so on, like challenges that you can do, made by some really great people. Pico CTF it's like a recurring CTF, but they keep all the challenges in an archive, and you can go back and solve them. I mean, of course, we talked a lot about like HackTheBox, which I personally don't use a lot, but it's it's a big one, so like always worth checking out. But even if you don't like CTF, like maybe that's not your thing, which is completely fine. Even though I think you should give it a second chance. Like there are tons of way of learning, like videos, reading, building things, playing challenges, and so on. So yeah, just again, anything is better than nothing, and I think even better is like make sure you get to do things hands-on. Like reading stuff and watching videos is great, but to really solidify that, I think you need to get your hands dirty and like write those exploits or like whatever, right? But yeah, and again, as you mentioned, I'm available on Twitter, for example. If you want to reach out, my DMs are open. I'm pretty sure they should be. And yeah, I think that's basically it.
Awesome. Thank you everyone for hanging out with us this Saturday morning in my part of the world, and Carl's afternoon. But thank you, Carl, and I'll see you guys